January 17, 1942. Somewhere over the black waters of the Pacific west of Oahu. The night is absolute. No moon, no stars, only the hum of engines and the whisper of wind across aluminum skin. Lieutenant Commander Howard Young banks his Grumman F4F Wildcat through the darkness, eyes straining against the void. Below, the ocean is invisible. Above, the sky offers no horizon. He is hunting, but hunting blind. Somewhere in this ink, a Japanese bomber crosses toward the Hawaiian Islands, its crew confident in the cloak of night. Young's hands grip the stick, his instruments glowing faintly green. He listens for the sound of enemy engines. He searches for the silhouette that will never appear. After 40 minutes, fuel gauges falling, he turns back. The bomber passes untouched. The night belongs to no one. Or perhaps to everyone but America. This is the revelation that haunts American commanders in the winter of 1942. The realization is cold and complete. The United States Army Air Forces possess no dedicated night fighter, no aircraft designed to hunt in darkness, no radar small enough, refined enough, to fit inside a cockpit and pierce the veil. While Britain's Bristol Beaufighters prowl the English night with airborne intercept radar, while Germany's Messerschmitt Bf-110s guide themselves toward RAF bombers using Liechtenstein arrays, America flies blind. The P-38 Lightning is fast, the P-47 Thunderbolt powerful, the P-51 Mustang graceful, but none were born for the dark. None carry the eyes that see without light. The war is 3 months old for America, but already the lesson is written in smoke and flame. Pearl Harbor came at dawn, but the bombers could have come at midnight. Tokyo's raiders strike the Philippines under cover of darkness. German U-boats surface at night to shell coastal towns along the Atlantic seaboard. And no patrol aircraft can find them in the black. The night is a sanctuary for the enemy, and America has no key to enter it. In the minds of strategists at Wright Field, in the halls of the Air Material Command, a single question burns: how do we hunt what we cannot see? The answer will not come from doctrine or tradition. It will come from a gamble, a wager placed on technology that barely exists, on engineers who have never built a night fighter, on a concept so new that even its name has yet to be spoken. It will come from Northrop Aircraft, a company known for flying wings and experimental shapes, and from a designer named John Knudsen Northrop, who believes that form must follow function, that beauty is efficiency, and that the future belongs to those willing to abandon the past. But first, there must be need. And in 1942, the need is written in every failed intercept, every untouched enemy bomber, every darkened city that waits in helpless silence for the sound of engines overhead. The German Luftwaffe had learned the lesson early. In the winter of 1939, as RAF Bomber Command began its tentative night raids over the Ruhr, German fighters scrambled into the dark and found nothing. The bombers were ghosts. Pilots returned frustrated, fuel exhausted. Their only victories accidental, brief moments when moonlight caught a wing, when an exhaust flame betrayed position. The kill rate was appalling. 1 bomber for every 75 sorties. Unacceptable. Untenable. So Germany adapted. Engineers at Telefunken began miniaturizing radar systems. The Würzburg ground control stations fed vectors to orbiting fighters. The Liechtenstein airborne radar, crude and heavy, was bolted into the nose of the Bf-110, and suddenly the night had eyes. By 1942, German night fighters were claiming bombers with brutal efficiency. The Kammhuber Line, a chain of radar stations and fighter zones stretching from Denmark to France, turned the night sky over Europe into a killing field. The RAF lost 1,000 bombers in 1942 alone, most to night fighters they never saw. Britain had countered with its own innovation. The AI-MK4 radar, developed in secrecy, gave Beaufighters and later Mosquitoes the ability to close on German bombers returning from raids on English cities. The system was primitive, a jumble of antennas protruding from the nose, a scope that showed blips and ranges but no detail, yet it worked. British night fighter crews became hunters, patient and precise, guided by the green glow of cathode rays. By mid-1941, the Luftwaffe's night bombing campaign against Britain had faltered, broken against the unseen net of radar-guided defenders. But America had none of this. When war came, the Army Air Forces had no airborne radar program, no night fighter doctrine, no aircraft even remotely suited for the role. The reasons were many: isolationist budgets, a focus on daylight precision bombing, the assumption that American wars would be fought in daylight, under clear skies, where superior numbers and firepower would prevail. The night was an afterthought. The dark was someone else's problem. Pearl Harbor shattered that assumption. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft struck in daylight. But the lesson was broader. The enemy would choose the time and method of attack, and America would have to respond. In the weeks that followed, as panic spread along the West Coast, as blackouts were ordered in Los Angeles and San Francisco, as rumors of Japanese submarines and carrier groups circulated, the vulnerability was stark. If the enemy came at night, there would be no defense. Patrol aircraft could search, but they could not see. Anti-aircraft guns could fire, but they could not aim. The cities would burn, and the nation would watch helplessly. In February 1942, the reality was confirmed. A Japanese submarine surfaced off the coast of California and shelled an oil refinery near Santa Barbara. The attack caused little damage, but the psychological impact was profound. America's shores were not safe, the ocean was not a barrier, and the night was the enemy's ally. In the offices of the Army Air Forces, in the research labs at Wright Field, the urgency became absolute. America needed a night fighter, and it needed one now. Jack Northrop was not a man given to haste. At 47, he was methodical, visionary, a designer who believed that aircraft should be pure expressions of aerodynamic truth. His flying wings, radical, tailless designs that eliminated every extraneous surface, were testaments to his philosophy, efficiency, elegance, simplicity. He had founded Northrop Aircraft in 1939 after years working for Douglas and Lockheed, and his small company in Hawthorne, California, was known for innovation, not mass production. When the Army Air Forces came to him in early 1942 with a request for a night fighter, Northrop understood the challenge was unlike any he had faced. The specifications were daunting. The aircraft would need to carry a crew of 3: pilot, radar operator, and gunner. It would need to mount airborne intercept radar, a system still in development, heavy and power-hungry. It would need armament sufficient to destroy a bomber in a single pass, cannons, not machine guns, firing a weight of metal that could shred aluminum and ignite fuel tanks. It would need range enough to patrol for hours, speed enough to chase down intruders, and stability enough to allow precise radar operation in turbulent night skies. And it would need to do all this while remaining maneuverable, because enemy fighters did not sleep either. No such aircraft existed. The closest analog was the British Beaufighter, but it was a converted torpedo bomber, heavy and sluggish. The German Bf-110 was faster but lacked internal volume for advanced radar. The Japanese had nothing comparable. Northrop would have to start from first principles, designing an airframe around the radar, not the other way around. The radar would be the heart, the eyes, the reason for existence. Everything else would serve it. The Army designated the project the XP-61. The X meant experimental. The P meant pursuit, though in truth this would be no dogfighter. It would be a hunter in the dark, patient and lethal. Northrop's engineers began work in March 1942, even as the final radar specifications remained uncertain. They knew only that the system would require a large nose compartment, operator access, and electrical power far beyond what any existing fighter generated. They knew the aircraft would be big, perhaps the largest fighter ever built. And they knew it would be black, because in the night, black was invisibility. The design that emerged was unlike anything in the American inventory. Twin boom configuration, placing the engines in streamlined nacelles on either side of a central pod. The booms extended aft to support twin vertical stabilizers and a high-mounted horizontal tail. The central pod housed the crew compartment, radar, and armament. The fuselage was wide and flat, providing lift and allowing the radar operator to sit behind the pilot with space for his equipment. Beneath the nose, a rotating turret would mount 4 50-caliber machine guns, later replaced by 4 20-mm cannons in the wings and belly. The engines would be Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasps, the same power plants used in the P-47 and F4F Hellcat, reliable, powerful, capable of 2,000 horsepower each. The wingspan would stretch 66 feet. The length just over 48. Empty weight, nearly 20,000 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, over 36,000 pounds. It would be massive. It would be slow compared to day fighters, but it would be purpose-built, every line and curve serving the mission of night interception. The radar was the gamble. In 1942, airborne radar was experimental. The British AIM-4 worked, but it was bulky and short-ranged. The American SCRAR 520, under development by MIT's Radiation Laboratory, promised better performance, range out to 5 miles, azimuth and elevation tracking, a clearer display, but it was untested, unproven, and still being refined. Northrop's engineers would have to design the nose compartment without knowing the exact dimensions of the final radar unit. They built in flexibility, modularity, space for adjustments. The radar operator's station was laid out with care, a scope mounted at eye level, controls within easy reach, space for maps and plotting tools. The operator would be the eyes. The pilot would be the hands. Together they would form a single organism, hunting by invisible light. The XP-61 mock-up was completed in September 1942. Army inspectors walked around it, measuring, questioning, imagining. It looked predatory, low, wide, engines slung outboard like weapons. The nose was a blank expanse of black metal, hiding the radar that would someday peer through the night. The twin booms gave it an insect-like quality, as if it might leap from the ground and seize prey mid-flight. Someone coined the name, Black Widow, the spider that hunts in darkness, spinning no web, waiting for no chance encounter, the spider that stalks. The name stuck. The project became official, the P-61 Black Widow, America's first purpose-designed night fighter. First flight was scheduled for May 1943. Production would follow if tests proved successful, but even as the prototype took shape in Northrop's Hawthorne plant, the war was accelerating. The night skies over Europe were burning. The Pacific was a theater of darkness, where carrier battles ended at dusk and submarines ruled until dawn. America needed the Black Widow not in 1944, but now. The pressure was relentless. The men who would fly the P-61 did not yet know it existed. In the spring of 1942, they were flying P-40s on patrol, or P-38s on escort duty, or sitting in classrooms learning the basics of radar operation from instructors who barely understood it themselves. Night fighting was not a glamorous assignment. It lacked the visibility of daylight dogfights, the camaraderie of bomber formations, the headlines earned by aces who stacked up kills in the sun. Night fighters hunted alone, in silence, guided by voices on the radio and the green shimmer of a radar scope. Success was measured not in victories but in bombers that never reached their targets, in raids that were turned back, in fires that never started. It was invisible work, thankless and essential. The first American night fighter units were equipped with British aircraft. The 481st Night Fighter Operational Training Group, formed in early 1943, flew Douglas P-70s, converted A-20 Havoc bombers fitted with British AI radar. The P-70 was a stopgap, underpowered and clumsy, but it taught crews the basics: how to interpret radar returns, how to coordinate between pilot and operator, how to close on a target without visual reference. The training was grueling. Night flights in blackout conditions, navigating by instruments alone, learning to trust the radar even when instinct screamed otherwise. Many crews washed out. Some flew into the ground, disoriented in the dark. Others simply could not adapt to the inverted logic of radar hunting, where the target was a blip on a screen, not a shape in the sky. By late 1943, the first P-61s began arriving at training bases. The crews who saw them were awed. The Black Widow was enormous compared to the P-70, yet it felt lighter, more responsive. The cockpit was spacious, the visibility excellent. The radar operator sat facing forward, a luxury compared to the cramped, sideways positions in converted bombers. The engines roared with authority. The armament, 4 20 mm cannons in the belly, later supplemented by 4 more in a dorsal turret, was devastating. This was a weapon, not a makeshift adaptation. This was what they had been waiting for. The first operational deployment came in the spring of 1944. The 422nd Night Fighter Squadron arrived in England, flying Black Widows from bases in East Anglia. Their mission: intercept German V-1 flying bombs, buzz bombs, launched against London. The V-1s were fast, over 400 miles per hour, and they flew at low altitude, making them difficult targets. But they were predictable, following straight courses, and their pulse jet engines glowed in the dark. The P-61s hunted them with cold efficiency. The radar would pick up the V-1 at 5 miles, the operator guiding the pilot into position. At 1,000 yards, the pilot would acquire the target visually, a tiny flame streaking across the night and close for the kill. The cannons would fire, a brief staccato roar, and the V-1 would disintegrate in a ball of orange fire. Between June and September 1944, the 422nd claimed over 50 V-1s destroyed. The Black Widow had proven itself. In the Pacific, the P-61's role was different. There were no massed bomber streams, no V-1s. Instead, the enemy was elusive: single Japanese bombers raiding Allied airfields, transport aircraft supplying bypassed garrisons, reconnaissance planes shadowing convoys. The P-61 squadrons, the 6th, 418th, and 421st, operated from jungle airstrips in New Guinea, the Philippines, and later Iwo Jima and Okinawa. They flew long, lonely patrols over Black Ocean, waiting for the call from ground control: bogey inbound, vector such and such. The radar would sweep the darkness, searching for the faint return of an aircraft dozens of miles away. When contact was made, the hunt began, a patient stalk, closing the range, adjusting altitude, until the target was close enough for visual identification. Japanese bombers were fragile, built light to maximize range. A burst from the P-61's cannons was usually enough. The enemy aircraft would shudder, catch fire, and spiral into the sea, leaving only a spreading oil slick that would be gone by morning. The kills were recorded, but the true measure of success was in the missions that never happened. The Japanese raids that were aborted when the bombers detected American radar searching for them. The supply flights that never took off because the night was no longer safe. The attrition that slowly strangled isolated garrisons, cut off not just by day, but by night as well. The P-61 crews rarely saw the results of their work. They returned to base in the pre-dawn darkness, landed by the glow of hooded runway lights, and filed reports that were read by intelligence officers and forgotten. There were no medals for the bomber that never arrived, no headlines for the fire that never burned. But the impact was cumulative. By 1945, the night belonged to America. There was a moment, recorded in the mission logs of the 548th Night Fighter Squadron, that captures the essence of what the P-61 represented. It was July 1945, over Okinawa. The island had been secured, but Japanese aircraft still attempted raids, desperate flights from Kyushu aimed at the airfields and supply dumps that fed the planned invasion of Japan. The raids came at dusk or just after midnight, when the radar net was most vulnerable. On this night, a single Japanese bomber, probably a Mitsubishi G4M Betty, approached from the north. Ground control vectored a P-61 toward the contact. The pilot was a lieutenant from Nebraska, 23 years old on his 40th mission. The radar operator was a tech sergeant from Brooklyn 25, who had trained on radar in New Jersey before the war and now saw the world through a 5-inch cathode ray tube. The intercept was textbook. The radar picked up the bogey at 12 miles. The operator called adjustments. Left 10 degrees. Steady. Range 8 miles. He's at Angels 10. Angels 10, 10,000 feet. The P-61 climbed smoothly, engines throttled back to reduce exhaust glow. At 4 miles, the operator refined the vector. Right 5. Steady. Range 2 miles. We're overtaking. The pilot scanned the darkness ahead, searching for the silhouette. Nothing. Range 1 mile. Dead ahead. Slightly high. And then, there it was. A shadow against the stars. The twin-engine shape of the Betty, cruising oblivious. The pilot eased the Black Widow into position. 300 yards astern. Slightly below. The gunsight reticle settled on the bomber's starboard engine. The cannons fired. Tracers 1 in 5 rounds arced into the night, bright and silent at this distance. The Betty's engine erupted in flame. The bomber rolled left, trying to dive away, but the P-61 followed effortlessly. Another burst, this time into the fuselage. The Betty broke apart in mid-air, pieces tumbling into the darkness. The crew of the P-61 watched it fall, flames spiraling down until they merged with the black ocean. The radar scope was empty. The sky was silent. The pilot turned back toward Okinawa. In his report, the pilot wrote, "1 Betty destroyed. No damage sustained. Return to base 247 hours. The radar operator added technical details, intercept range, closure rate, final distance at time of fire." The intelligence officer summarized it in a single line: 1 enemy bomber destroyed. Vicinity Okinawa, night of July 1819. The war would end in 3 weeks. And this kill would be forgotten in the flood of news about atomic bombs and surrender ceremonies. But to the men who flew the P-61, this was the mission. This was what the Black Widow had been built for. Not glory, not headlines, but the quiet elimination of threats in the dark. The patient hunt, the invisible victory. The night made safe. The Black Widow's combat record, when tallied, is modest by the standards of legendary fighters. P-61 squadrons claimed approximately 127 enemy aircraft destroyed in the European and Pacific theaters combined. Compare this to the thousands claimed by P-51s, P-47s, F-6F Hellcats. But the comparison is false. The P-61 did not compete with day fighters. It operated in a realm where they could not follow. It hunted prey that was invisible to everyone else. Its victories were not measured in numbers, but in capabilities, in the fact that by 1945, no enemy bomber could approach an American base at night with any confidence of survival, in the fact that the darkness, once the enemy's sanctuary, had become contested, then dominated, then owned. The technological legacy was even more profound. The P-61 was America's first operational aircraft to integrate airborne radar as a primary system, not an afterthought. The SCRAR 720 radar it carried, an improved version of the SCRAR 520, became the template for post-war systems. The lessons learned in radar operation, crew coordination, and night intercept tactics were codified into doctrine that would guide the development of jet-age night fighters, the F-94 Starfire, the F-89 Scorpion, ultimately the interceptors of the Cold War equipped with missiles and infrared. Seekers. The Black Widow proved that radar could be miniaturized, that it could be operated in combat conditions, that it could turn night from a barrier into a battlefield. There was a broader symbolism, though the men who flew and maintained the P-61 likely never articulated it. The Black Widow represented a peculiarly American approach to warfare, the application of technology to overcome natural limitations, the belief that any problem could be solved through innovation, the willingness to gamble on untested ideas when the stakes were high. Germany had developed night fighters out of necessity, adapting existing designs to a desperate situation. Britain had done the same, improvising solutions as bombs fell on London. But America designed the P-61 from a blank sheet, imagining a future where radar and aircraft were seamlessly integrated, where night was not a challenge to be endured but a domain to be conquered. It was, in its way, an expression of optimism, the conviction that the war could not only be won, but won on America's terms, using America's strengths. And there was the matter of production. Northrop built 706 P-61s between 1943 and 1945, not a large number by wartime standards. Boeing built over 12,000 B-17s. North American built more than 15,000 P-51s. But enough. Enough to equip every night fighter squadron in the Pacific and Europe. Enough to establish air superiority in the dark. The Black Widow was never in short supply, never desperately needed in numbers it could not meet. This, too, was an expression of American industrial might, the ability to produce not just mass quantities of standard designs but also specialized, complex aircraft in sufficient numbers to achieve strategic effect. The enemy could not match this. Germany's night fighters grew scarce as factories were bombed and fuel evaporated. Japan's night defenses crumbled for lack of radar, training, and aircraft. America's Black Widows kept flying, kept hunting, kept denying the night to those who once owned it. The war ended, and the P-61 became obsolete almost overnight. Jets were the future, faster, higher flying, and the Black Widow's piston engines could not compete. The last operational squadron stood down in 1950, replaced by F-94s. Most P-61s were scrapped, cut apart for aluminum. A few survived as test beds, drones, weather reconnaissance aircraft. Today, only 4 remain in museums, silent and black, their radar noses empty, their cannons inert. Visitors walk past them without pausing, drawn instead to Mustangs and Spitfires, fighters that gleam in polished silver and wear the kill markings of aces. The Black Widow is too large, too strange, too specific to inspire casual admiration. It is a specialist's aircraft, remembered by specialists. But there is a thread that runs from the P-61 to every radar-equipped fighter that followed, to every AWACS aircraft orbiting above a battlefield, to every drone tracking targets by synthetic aperture radar in the dead of night. The thread is the idea that darkness is not a limit, but a canvas, and technology is the brush. The men who designed the Black Widow in 1942 did not have the tools they needed, so they invented them. The men who flew it did not have the training they needed, so they created it. The result was imperfect, sometimes clumsy, often overlooked. But it worked. It turned the night from an enemy advantage into an American one. It made the invisible visible. In the end, the P-61 Black Widow was not about the aircraft itself. Sleek or ungainly, fast or slow, celebrated or forgotten. It was about the willingness to see a gap and fill it, to recognize a weakness and transform it into strength, to refuse the night as an excuse. In January 1942, America had no night fighters, and the darkness was the enemy's. By January 1945, the darkness was America's, and the enemy had nowhere left to hide. That transformation from blindness to sight, from vulnerability to dominance, was written in every line of the Black Widow's twin-boom silhouette, in every green pulse on a radar scope, in every silent kill over black water. It was written in the choice to build something new rather than adapt something old, to trust engineers who had never built a night fighter, to equip pilots with eyes made of radio waves and believe they could learn to see. And when the war was over and the Black Widows were gone, that transformation remained. It lived in the doctrine that said no sky, no hour, no darkness would ever again be beyond reach. It lived in the certainty that technology could pierce any veil, that innovation could answer any threat, that the night, like every other frontier, was there to be conquered, not feared. The P-61 Black Widow flew for only 2 years of war. But the truth it carried flies still, that America, when faced with darkness, does not retreat. It builds a light, and if no light exists, it invents one. And then it hunts. That is the legacy written in black paint and radar pulses, in the hum of our 2800 engines fading into the dark, in the silence that follows the kill. The enemy thought the night was his. The Black Widow proved him wrong.